I came back from my business trip a day early. It wasn't planned. My last meeting was canceled, so I decided to surprise my wife, Amanda. I imagined her face lighting up when she saw me. Maybe we'd cook dinner together or just sit and talk the way we hadn't in months. Life had been busy, and I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to reconnect. Pulling into the driveway, I noticed something strange right away. The house was lit up like it was hosting a gala. Every window glowed, and there was a faint thrum of music vibrating through the air. I frowned. Amanda hadn't mentioned anything about having friends over. She wasn't the spontaneous party type, especially on a Tuesday night. When I stepped inside, I was hit by the scene like a truck. Our living room, was packed with people, some standing in clusters, others lounging on the furniture we picked out together. Loud laughter mingled with upbeat music, and the smell of spilled wine and something else. A sickly sweet perfume hung in the air. And then I saw her, Amanda, my wife of 10 years, sitting on another man's lap. Not just sitting, practically draped over him. Her hand rested on his shoulder as she leaned in close, laughing at something he whispered in her ear. She looked radiant, carefree in a way I hadn't seen in years, but not in the way a wife should look when her husband walks in unexpectedly. The man she was with wasn't a stranger. It was Trevor, her boss, the CEO of the company she worked for. A slick, overly charming guy I'd met a handful of times at her office parties. He always had this air of arrogance, the kind of man who thought the rules didn't apply to him. And now, here he was, sitting in my home with my wife on his lap, looking as comfortable as if he owned the place. I froze for a moment, unable to process what I was seeing. The noise around me blurred into a dull roar as my mind tried to make sense of the scene. But then Amanda noticed me. "Oh," she said, her tone so casual it made my stomach turn. "You came back early?" She didn't move, didn't jump up or even act surprised. She just tilted her head slightly, like I was the one intruding. I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could, she smiled. A slow, smug smile that felt like a slap to the face. "Well," she added with a shrug, "you weren't invited." Her words hit me like a knife to the chest. But before I could even react, Trevor chuckled, his arm tightening around her waist like he had some kind of claim on her. The room, once filled with chatter, fell silent as people turned to watch the unfolding drama. "Excuse me," I finally managed to say, my voice low and steady, though my hands were trembling at my sides. Amanda rolled her eyes. "Relax, Nathan. It's just a party. Don't make it a thing." A thing? She was openly humiliating me in front of everyone, and she had the audacity to act like I was overreacting? My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst, but I forced myself to stay calm. I took a step forward, locking eyes with her. "Get up. Now." She laughed, a sharp, mocking sound that made the room feel 10 degrees colder. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. You're embarrassing yourself." Something in me snapped. I wasn't going to let her turn this into some petty argument where I was the bad guy. Reaching into my bag, I pulled out my phone. "I didn't come here to argue," I said, my voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "I came to show you this." With a few taps, I pulled up a video and hit play. The room fell deathly quiet as Amanda's face appeared on the screen, her arms wrapped around Trevor in what could only be described as intimate. The timestamp showed it was recorded just 2 nights ago, while I was halfway across the country. Amanda's smirk disappeared instantly. Her face went pale, and she shot up from Trevor's lap as if the chair had caught fire. "What the hell is this?" she demanded, her voice rising. "It's proof," I said, my words heavy with barely contained fury. "Proof that while I've been working my ass off to support us, you've been doing this." I gestured to the video, then to Trevor, who now looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. For a moment, she stood there, her mouth opening and closing as if searching for an excuse, a way out. But no words came. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Amanda snapped, her expression twisting into something ugly. "You had no right to spy on me," she spat, as if I was the one who'd betrayed her. "No right," I repeated, my voice rising for the first time. "I had every right, Amanda. This is my marriage, my home, and you've been treating it like your playground." The tension in the room was unbearable. I could feel the stares of her friends, her coworkers, the people she'd invited into our lives. But I didn't care anymore. The woman standing in front of me wasn't the Amanda I married. "Get out," she hissed suddenly, pointing toward the door. "What?" "You heard me," she said, her voice sharp and cold. "Get. This is my house now." The audacity of her words left me speechless. I looked around the room at the faces of people who didn't belong here, and then back at her. I realized in that moment that Amanda wasn't just unfaithful. She was cruel. But I wasn't leaving, not without a plan. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot that I stood there, stunned, as Amanda glared at me, her finger still pointing at the door like I was some intruder in my own home. The house that I paid for, the life we had built. She was tossing it aside like it meant nothing. Her audacity was breathtaking. But I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of a reaction. Not yet. The room stayed silent, heavy with tension. Everyone was watching, their eyes darting between us like they were waiting for the next explosive moment. Even Trevor looked uncomfortable now, his usual smug grin replaced by a tight-lipped expression as he shifted in his seat. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "You're kicking me out of my own house?" I asked, my voice low and even. Amanda crossed her arms, the corner of her mouth twitching like she was trying to hold onto some semblance of control. "You made this public, Nathan. You embarrassed me in front of everyone, so yeah, you should leave." "Embarrassed you?" I said, letting out a bitter laugh. "You're the one who turned our marriage into a joke. You're the one draped over your boss like a cheap throw blanket in the middle of our living room. Don't talk to me about embarrassment." The crowd murmured. Whispers, gasps, someone even chuckled nervously. Amanda's jaw tightened, and for a split second, I saw something flash in her eyes. Was it guilt? Fear? It didn't matter. Whatever it was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by that same cold, unfeeling stare. "You know what?" I said, my voice cutting through the murmurs. "I will leave, but not before I say this." I turned to Trevor, who had the decency to look mildly ashamed. "I hope you realize what you're getting yourself into. You think you've won, but you have no idea what she's capable of." Trevor opened his mouth, probably to spit out some weak justification, but I didn't give him the chance. "And as for you, Amanda," I said, turning back to her, "you just made the biggest mistake of your life." She smirked, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, please, don't be so dramatic, Nathan. It's not like you're a saint. You're never here, always off on business trips. Maybe if you'd paid more attention, we wouldn't be having this conversation." The crowd murmured again, and I could feel the heat rising in my chest. "Don't you dare try to spin this on me," I said through gritted teeth. "I worked those hours to give us a life, to give you the freedom to live comfortably. And this is how you repay me? By turning our home into a circus and humiliating me in front of strangers." Amanda didn't respond. Instead, she grabbed a glass of wine from a side table and took a long, slow sip, like none of this mattered. The level of disrespect was staggering. Fine, two could play at this game. I pulled out my phone again, but this time, I wasn't showing another video. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I was looking for. With a deliberate slowness, I pressed call. Amanda's eyes flicked to my phone, a hint of confusion creeping into her expression. "Who are you calling?" she asked, her voice suddenly less confident. "You'll see," I said, my tone casual. The line rang once, twice, and then, "Hello?" A deep, familiar voice answered. "Hi, Bill," I said, addressing Amanda's father. "Sorry to bother you so late, but I thought you'd want to know what your daughter's been up to." Amanda's face went white as a sheet. "Nathan," she hissed, lunging toward me, but I stepped back, holding up a hand to stop her. "Bill," I continued, my voice loud enough for everyone in the room to hear. "Did you know Amanda's been having an affair with her boss? Yeah. She's throwing a party right now in our house, while I'm standing here watching her act like it's no big deal." "Nathan, stop." Amanda's voice was shrill now, panic replacing her earlier arrogance. She reached for the phone, but I sidestepped her again. "Bill, I've got it all on video," I added. "Thought you might want to weigh in on how we should handle this." There was a heavy silence on the other end of the line before Bill finally spoke. "Nathan," he said, his voice gruff, Stay there. I'll be right over. Amanda's hand fell to her side, and for the first time that night, she looked truly shaken. You didn't have to do that, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. No, I replied, slipping my phone back into my pocket. But I wanted to. And with that, I walked out the door, leaving Amanda to deal with the wreckage she'd created. I sat in my car, parked just down the street, the engine off. My hands gripped the steering wheel as I stared at the glow of our house, the house that now felt like a stranger's lair. The music inside had quieted, but the lights were still on, and I could imagine Amanda scrambling to explain herself to her party guests. Let her. The storm I'd just unleashed was only the beginning. My phone buzzed. It was Bill. Where are you? He barked, skipping any pleasantries. 2 houses down, I replied. Did you bring someone with you? I brought your brother-in-law, he said, and my stomach churned. Kyle, Amanda's older brother, was a no-nonsense guy who had no patience for dishonesty. He was fiercely loyal to family, but he also despised betrayal. This wasn't going to be pretty. A black truck turned the corner, its headlights cutting through the night, and I watched as Bill and Kyle pulled up in front of the house. They stepped out, both looking grim. Bill was a tall, broad-shouldered man who had spent most of his life running his own construction company. His gruff demeanor could silence a room, and tonight, he looked ready to tear walls down. Kyle, younger but just as imposing, followed closely behind. I got out of my car and walked up to meet them. I thought you should see it for yourselves, I said quietly. Bill's jaw tightened, and Kyle just nodded, his face like stone. Without a word, the 3 of us approached the house. I could hear voices inside, Amanda's sharp, frantic tone rising above the others. When Bill pushed open the door, the room went dead silent. Dad? Amanda's voice wavered as she stepped forward, her face pale. She was holding an empty wine glass, as if trying to look casual, but her hands were shaking. What are you doing here? Bill's eyes scanned the room, taking in the disheveled scene. Wine-stained carpets, half-eaten plates of food, and the uncomfortable faces of her friends. Finally, his gaze landed on Trevor, who was standing near the fireplace, looking as out of place as a wolf in a chicken coop. You want to explain what's going on here? Bill's voice was calm, but it carried a weight that made everyone in the room shrink back. Amanda opened her mouth, but no words came out. She looked at Trevor, then at me, her composure cracking like thin ice. Nathan's exaggerating, she said finally, her voice high-pitched. It's just a party, Dad. That's all. Bill raised an eyebrow. Exaggerating, huh? He turned to me. Nathan, show them. I didn't hesitate. I pulled out my phone, opening the video I'd shown Amanda earlier, and held it up for everyone to see. The footage played in damning silence. Amanda and Trevor, locked in an intimate embrace, her laughter echoing like a ghost in the room. Kyle cursed under his breath, his fists clenching at his sides. Bill, however, stayed eerily calm. This, Bill said, pointing at the phone screen. This is just a party? Amanda stepped forward, her hands raised defensively. Dad, it's not what it looks like. Bill let out a harsh laugh. Not what it looks like. Amanda, I might be old, but I'm not blind. You're sitting here humiliating your husband, throwing some trashy party while you've got another man all over you. You think this is acceptable? Trevor finally decided to speak, stepping toward Bill with an air of false confidence. Sir, with all due respect, this isn't your business. The room went still. Bill turned to Trevor, his face hard as granite. Who the hell do you think you're talking to? Trevor opened his mouth, but before he could say anything, Kyle stepped forward, his voice like a whip. You need to leave. Now. Trevor hesitated, glancing at Amanda for support, but she looked away, her face flushed with embarrassment. Realizing he was alone, he raised his hands in mock surrender. Fine, I'll go. As Trevor grabbed his coat and headed for the door, Kyle followed him, his presence like a shadow. If I ever see you near this house again, Kyle said, his voice low and menacing, you'll regret it. The door slammed behind Trevor, and the room was quiet again. Amanda stood frozen, her gaze darting between us like a cornered animal. You've got a lot of explaining to do, Bill said, his tone cold. And you'd better start now. For the first time, Amanda's confidence broke entirely. Tears welled in her eyes as she tried to speak, but no words came out. She wasn't crying out of regret. No, this was fear of losing everything. But I wasn't about to let her play the victim. I stepped forward, my voice steady. You're not getting out of this, Amanda. Not with tears, not with excuses. You made your choice. Now you're going to face the consequences. The silence that followed was deafening. But in that moment, I knew one thing for sure. This was far from over. Amanda stood there, trembling. Her usual sharp tongue was suddenly nowhere to be found. It was a rare sight. This woman who had spent years mastering the art of control, now reduced to stammering in front of her father, brother, and husband. For a second, I wondered if she'd try to dig herself out. But as the silence stretched, her lack of defense became its own confession. Finally, Bill broke the tension. Well, his voice was low but thunderous, each word hammering down like a judge's gavel. We're waiting, Amanda. You think tears are going to fix this? Explain yourself. Amanda's hands twisted the fabric of her dress, her knuckles white. She started, her voice barely audible. It wasn't supposed to. I didn't mean for. Spit it out, Cal snapped, stepping closer. His towering frame was imposing enough, but the disappointment in his eyes cut deeper than any anger. You've been caught. At least have the guts to own up to it. Amanda's eyes darted toward me, but I refused to offer her an ounce of mercy. This was her mess, and I wasn't going to clean it up for her. It just happened, she finally said, her voice cracking. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Bill's face darkened. Didn't mean for what to go this far? Be specific, Amanda. Her lips quivered as she looked down at the floor. Trevor and we started talking at work, and talking? I interrupted, my voice cold. Is that what you call it? Because that video sure as hell didn't look like talking. She flinched, but I pressed on, my anger bubbling over. You think this is some mistake you can brush under the rug? How long? Amanda, how long has this been going on? Her silence was all the confirmation I needed. Answer him, Kyle barked, his voice reverberating through the room. Amanda wiped at her eyes, her voice barely above a whisper. 6 months. The room seemed to shrink around us, the weight of her words pressing down on everyone. 6 months. Half a year of lies, deceit, and humiliation. I felt like I couldn't breathe, the betrayal slicing through me all over again. Bill took a step closer, his expression a mixture of rage and heartbreak. 6 months? He repeated, shaking his head. While Nathan was out there working his ass off to give you this life, you were sneaking around with your boss. You disgust me, Amanda. You've embarrassed this family. Her tears flowed freely now, but they did nothing to soften Bill's anger or mine. I don't know what to say, she sobbed, her voice trembling. You don't need to say anything, I said sharply. You've said enough with your actions. And don't you dare try to make this about your feelings now. This isn't some mistake you can cry your way out of. Kyle crossed his arms, his jaw tightening. You've burned every bridge tonight, Amanda. Don't expect anyone here to feel sorry for you. For a moment, Amanda looked like she might fight back, like the defiant side of her might resurface. But then her shoulders slumped, and she turned to me, her voice trembling. What do you want me to do, Nathan? Just tell me. What do you want from me? I stared at her, my mind racing. What did I want? Revenge? Justice? An apology that didn't feel hollow and self-serving? I'll tell you what I want, I said finally, my voice steady. I want you out of this house by tomorrow. Pack your things and leave. Go live with Trevor, since you seem to think he's worth throwing everything away for. Her mouth fell open, and she took a shaky step forward. Nathan, wait. No, I snapped, cutting her off. You don't get to wait. You don't get to ask for understanding after what you've done. I've spent 10 years of my life with you, and you've shown me exactly how little that means to you. So no, Amanda, we're done. The room was silent again, the finality of my words hanging in the air. Amanda looked to her father, then to Kyle, but neither of them came to her defense. Bill crossed his arms. Nathan's right. You made this mess, Amanda. You can't expect anyone to clean it up for you. Kyle nodded. You've got until tomorrow. Don't make this harder than it already is. Amanda's tears turned to sobs, but none of us moved to comfort her. She had chosen this path, and now she would have to walk it alone. As I turned to leave the room, I felt a strange sense of clarity. The pain was still there, sharp and unforgiving, but beneath it was something else. Resolve. This wasn't just the end of my marriage. It was the beginning of something new, something better. And Amanda? She'd made her bed. Now she could lie in it. The next morning, I returned to the house with one purpose: to make sure Amanda was gone. After everything that had happened the night before, I didn't trust her to handle this quietly or gracefully. When I pulled into the driveway, her car was still there. My chest tightened as I imagined her inside, clinging to some fantasy that she could talk her way out of this. But the moment I opened the door, I was greeted by the sound of shuffling boxes and the scrape of furniture being dragged across the floor. Amanda was in the living room, her face pale and blotchy from crying. She was surrounded by half-packed boxes and suitcases, her movements slow and robotic. The once confident woman who had mocked me in front of her friends was now a shadow of herself. "You're still here?" I said coldly, stepping inside. She flinched at the sound of my voice but didn't look up. "I'm leaving," she said quietly. "I just need more time." I crossed my arms, leaning against the doorframe. "You had all night, Amanda. I told you to be out by this morning." Her hands tightened around a picture frame she was packing, her knuckles white. "Nathan, please," she whispered. "Don't do this." "Do what?" I snapped. "Hold you accountable for your choices? You should be thankful I haven't done worse. Trevor might have gotten away with a free pass last night, but believe me, I'm not done with him yet." Her head shot up at that, her eyes wide with panic. "What are you talking about?" I smirked, the first hint of satisfaction I'd felt in days. "Oh, Amanda, did you really think this ends with you packing your bags? I've already sent the video to HR at your company. Let's see how Trevor explains his way out of that one." Her face went ashen, her lips trembling. "Nathan, you can't." "I can," I said, cutting her off. "And I did. You two thought you could betray me and face no consequences? You've been lying to me for months. Amanda, lying to everyone. It's about time the truth came out." She set the frame down, her hands shaking. "You're going to ruin his career," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I let out a bitter laugh. Ruin his career? He ruined his own career when he decided to cross that line with a married employee. Or are you still trying to protect him? Even now? Amanda looked down, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't think it would get this far," she choked out. "You didn't think at all," I shot back. "You didn't think about me, about us, about the life we built together. You only thought about yourself." For a moment, she said nothing. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. Then, she whispered, "What happens now?" I took a deep breath, my anger tempered by a cold clarity. Now you leave. And after that, I file for divorce. You'll hear from my lawyer soon." Her sobs grew louder, but I felt no sympathy. Not anymore. The woman I had loved was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized. "I'll be out by tonight," she said finally, her voice shaking. "Good," I replied, turning toward the door. But before I stepped outside, I paused. "Oh, and Amanda?" She looked up, her tear-streaked face filled with despair. "Don't bother calling me," I said. "We're done." With that, I walked out, leaving her to face the wreckage of her own making. Later that afternoon, I got a call from an old friend, someone who worked in the same industry as Trevor. The fallout from the video had already begun. Trevor had been called into an emergency meeting with the board, and Amanda's name was being dragged through every office whisper. It wasn't long before both of them would face the professional consequences of their actions. I wasn't proud of how things had ended, but I wasn't ashamed either. Amanda had made her choices, and now the weight of those decisions was crashing down around her. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. The pain was still raw, but there was a strange sense of freedom in knowing I didn't have to carry her betrayal anymore. As I looked out at the horizon, a thought struck me. This wasn't just the end of a chapter. It was the start of a new one. And this time, I was writing it on my own terms. The next few days unfolded like a carefully set chain of dominoes. Amanda left that night, true to her word. When I returned home the following morning, her car was gone, and with it, the remnants of the life we'd built together. The house felt emptier than it ever had, even when I was alone during my business trips. But it wasn't sadness I felt. It was relief. I didn't have to pretend anymore. I didn't have to come home wondering what new excuse Amanda would have for her coldness, her distance. The silence wasn't suffocating now. It was clean, peaceful. It didn't take long for the fallout at her workplace to spiral. By midweek, Trevor had been removed as CEO. My contact inside the company kept me updated. Apparently, the board had zero tolerance for relationships between executives and subordinates, especially when evidence of the affair was floating around. "Your video was the final nail in the coffin," my friend told me over the phone. "But from what I hear, Trevor's been rubbing people the wrong way for years. They were waiting for an excuse to get rid of him. You just handed it to them on a silver platter." I couldn't help but feel a grim satisfaction. Trevor had strutted around like he was untouchable, and now his entire world was crumbling. Amanda wasn't spared either. Though she hadn't been fired outright, HR had launched a formal investigation. The whispers in the office grew louder, and within days, she had taken a leave of absence. I imagined her sitting in some cramped apartment, because she sure as hell wasn't staying with Trevor anymore, watching everything unravel. Good. She deserved every second of it. Meanwhile, I was taking steps to rebuild my own life. I'd already contacted a lawyer, and the divorce papers were being drawn up. The process was surprisingly quick since Amanda and I didn't have kids, and most of our assets were in my name. She wouldn't be walking away with much, especially after what she'd done. The emotional side, however, wasn't so straightforward. I had moments, late at night when the house was dark and quiet, where the weight of it all hit me. The betrayal, the humiliation, the years I'd spent believing in someone who had thrown me away like I was disposable. But those moments didn't last long. Each time the pain threatened to consume me, I reminded myself of something. This isn't my failure, it's hers. And then there was the matter of Amanda's friends. The same people who had been at that party, laughing and drinking in my house, while she paraded her betrayal in front of them. One by one, I started hearing from them. "Hey, Nathan. I had no idea what was going on. If I'd known, I wouldn't have been there. Nathan, man. I'm so sorry about everything. Amanda made it seem like you guys were already separated. Nathan, I feel awful. I wish I'd said something sooner." Every message, every call, was an attempt to save face, to distance themselves from the disaster they'd witnessed. But I wasn't interested in their apologies. "You were there," I told one of them flatly. "You saw what was happening, and you said nothing. Don't bother pretending you care now." After that, I stopped answering their calls. By the end of the week, something unexpected happened. Kyle reached out. "Can we talk?" he asked, his tone serious. "Sure," I said. "What's up?" "Not over the phone," he replied. "I'll swing by later." When he arrived, he looked even more exhausted than he had the night of the confrontation. He sat down across from me, rubbing his temples before he spoke. "I've been talking to Amanda," he said finally. I tensed, but he raised a hand. "Don't worry. I didn't call to defend her. I needed to understand what the hell she was thinking." "And?" I asked, my voice cold. Kyle sighed. "She's a mess. She's blaming Trevor for everything, saying he manipulated her, made her feel special. But honestly, I think she's just trying to justify it to herself. Deep down, she knows she screwed up." I leaned back in my chair, processing his words. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I wanted you to hear it from me," he said, meeting my gaze. "Amanda's not going to take responsibility for this, Nathan. Not fully. She's too proud, too stubborn. But I wanted you to know that I don't blame you for any of it. You deserved better than what she gave you." His words caught me off guard, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of something unexpected. Closure. "Thanks," I said finally. Kyle stood, hesitating for a moment before he spoke again. "If there's anything you need, anything at all, just let me know." I nodded, and with that, he left. That night, I sat on the couch, staring at the empty space where Amanda's favorite painting used to hang. The house was quieter now, emptier. But for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like a prison. Felt like freedom. And as I sat there, I realized something. I wasn't just surviving this. I was taking my life back, piece by piece. And I wasn't going to let anyone, not Amanda, not Trevor, not the ghosts of what could have been, hold me down again. That I thought the dust was beginning to settle. Amanda was gone. The divorce was in motion, and Trevor's professional empire had crumbled. But as the days passed, I realized that Amanda wasn't the type to leave quietly. Started with a phone call. "Hello." I answered, expecting it to be my lawyer. "Nathan." Amanda's voice came through, hesitant and shaky. I almost hung up right then, but something made me stay on the line. "What do you want?" I asked, my tone as icy as I felt. She paused, clearly trying to choose her words carefully. "I've been thinking about everything, about us, and I need to say I'm sorry." The apology was so unexpected that I almost laughed. Sorry? Now? After weeks of silence and years of betrayal, she thought an apology was going to fix things? "Save it, Amanda," I said sharply. "I don't need your apology. I need you to stay out of my life." She sniffled, and for a brief moment, I wondered if her tears were genuine. But then she said something that stopped me cold. "You know, I could have taken you for a lot more in this divorce," she said, her voice gaining a sharp edge. "I've been reasonable so far, Nathan. Don't push me." I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm just saying," she replied, her tone turning smug, "that things could get a lot messier for you. You've made this personal. Dragging Trevor's name through the mud. Sending that video to my office. Did you think there wouldn't be consequences?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Amanda, you destroyed this marriage. You cheated on me in our home. And you have the audacity to act like I'm the one who's out of line. You're not perfect either," she snapped. "You were never around, Nathan. Always off on business trips, always putting your work first. Don't act like you didn't play a part in this." There it was. The same deflection, the same refusal to take responsibility. It was like talking to a wall. "You're unbelievable," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "You think you're going to turn this around on me? Go ahead, Amanda. Try. Take whatever you want in the divorce. But know this, I will fight you every step of the way. You've already lost everything that mattered, and now you're about to lose whatever scraps you have left." She didn't respond. The line went dead, and I slammed the phone down, my blood boiling. The next morning, my lawyer called with an update. Amanda had officially filed her response to the divorce, and as expected, she was fighting for more than her fair share. "She's asking for alimony," he said, his voice laced with disbelief. "She claims you emotionally neglected her and that it contributed to the breakdown of the marriage." I let out a bitter laugh. "Of course she does. Anything else? She's also asking for half of the house," he continued. "Even though it's in your name, she's arguing that she contributed to maintaining the home during your marriage." It was classic Amanda. Twist the narrative, play the victim, and squeeze as much as she could out of the situation. But I wasn't going to let her win. "Fight it," I said firmly. "I don't care what it takes. She doesn't deserve a single dime." My lawyer hesitated. "I can do that, Nathan. But just know, these kinds of battles can get expensive and messy." "Let it get messy," I said, my voice filled with resolve. "I'm not backing down." That afternoon, I got a text from an unknown number. "You think you're so smart, don't you? Just wait." I knew exactly who it was from. Trevor. I stared at the message, my pulse quickening. It was clear he wasn't done trying to meddle in my life. But instead of responding, I saved the number and forwarded the message to my lawyer. "If they want war," I muttered to myself, "they're going to get it." The next few weeks turned into a chess match. Amanda tried to smear my name during the divorce proceedings, bringing up every minor flaw and exaggerating it into a character assassination. She accused me of neglect, of being emotionally unavailable, even of abandoning her during my business trips. But I had something she didn't. Proof. The video, the text messages between her and Trevor, the timeline that clearly showed her betrayal while I was working to support us. And then there was Trevor. A week after Amanda's threats, I got another call from my contact at her company. Trevor had officially been terminated. But it didn't stop there. His wife, yes, he was married, had found out about the affair and filed for divorce herself. The dominoes were falling faster now, and I could see Amanda's world crumbling in real time. One night, as I sat at my kitchen table reviewing the latest legal documents, my phone buzzed again. This time it was from Kyle. "Can we talk?" "It's about Amanda." I sighed, already exhausted from everything, but I agreed to meet him. If nothing else, Kyle had been one of the few people to stand by me during this mess. When we met up, he looked more serious than I'd ever seen him. "She's spiraling," he said bluntly. "She's talking about getting back at you, Nathan. She's not thinking clearly, and I'm worried she's going to do something stupid." "Like what?" I asked, my guard immediately going up. He hesitated before answering. "I don't know. But if I were you, I'd watch your back." It wasn't the reassurance I wanted, but it was the warning I needed. This wasn't just about ending a marriage anymore. It was about protecting myself from whatever Amanda and Trevor or anyone else had planned next. And I wasn't going to let them win. Kyle's warning stuck with me, a constant shadow as I moved through the days. Amanda wasn't just bitter. She was desperate, and desperate people made reckless choices. The first sign came a week later. My lawyer called me early in the morning, his voice tight with urgency. "Nathan, we've got a problem," he said. "What kind of problem?" "Your wife filed a counterclaim in the divorce proceedings," he said, pausing before continuing. "She's accusing you of financial misconduct, hiding assets, falsifying income reports, that kind of thing." I laughed bitterly. "Are you kidding me? That's insane. I've been transparent about everything." "I know," he replied. "But these kinds of claims can drag the process out. She's trying to make this as painful as possible." "Can we prove it's false?" I asked. "Absolutely," he assured me. "But it's going to take time, and that's what she wants. To wear you down, force you to settle on her terms." That wasn't going to happen. The next move came in the form of a letter. It was hand-delivered to my office, an unmarked envelope with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a typed message. "You think you're in control, but this is far from over. We'll see who's laughing in the end." There was no signature, but I didn't need one to know it was from Amanda or Trevor. I handed the letter over to my lawyer and filed a police report. If they were trying to intimidate me, they'd have to do better than that. But it wasn't just about the letter. It was the principle. They were escalating, and I needed to be ready for whatever came next. That weekend, I decided to take matters into my own hands. It wasn't enough to play defense anymore. I needed to go on the offensive. I started digging into Trevor's history. He was already a known sleaze, but I was looking for something bigger, something that could expose him for the fraud he was. And it didn't take long to find it. Using some contacts I had in the business world, I discovered that Trevor had been funneling company funds into a private account for years. The evidence was damning: bank statements, emails, and even a few signed documents that tied him directly to the scheme. But I didn't stop there. A little more digging uncovered something even juicier: Trevor's involvement in a previous scandal at another company. He'd managed to keep it quiet back then. But now, with his reputation already in tatters, this was the nail in the coffin. I compiled everything into a neat little package and sent it anonymously to a trusted journalist I knew, the kind of person who thrived on exposing corporate corruption. And then I waited. The fallout came faster than I expected. Within days, the story was everywhere. Headlines screamed about Trevor's financial crimes, his shady business dealings, and the affair that had triggered his downfall. Amanda's name wasn't mentioned directly, but everyone who knew the story connected the dots. When the news broke, my phone lit up with messages. Some were from mutual friends, shocked and scandalized. Others were from Amanda's former co-workers, thanking me for taking Trevor down. And then there was Amanda herself. She called late that night, her voice shaking with fury. "What the hell did you do, Nathan? What needed to be done?" I said calmly. "You ruined his life." She screamed. "You didn't have to take it this far." I laughed, the sound cold and sharp. "Ruined his life? Amanda, he ruined his own life. I just gave people the receipts." She was silent for a moment, and I could almost hear the wheels turning in her head. Finally, she said, "You're going to pay for this." "No, Amanda," I said, my voice steady. You're the one who's going to pay. You've spent months trying to destroy me, but all you've done is dig your own grave. Enjoy it." I hung up before she could respond, a sense of finality settling over me. The next day, Kyle called again. "Trevor's done," he said simply. "The story's everywhere. Amanda's freaking out. She's saying you've gone too far." "And what do you think?" I asked. "I think she's reaping what she sowed," he replied. "But Nathan, be careful. She's not going to let this go." "I'm ready," I said. But the truth was, I wasn't sure what Amanda had left to throw at me. Her marriage to Trevor's sinking ship was obvious now, and the world knew the kind of man she'd chosen over me. Whatever she had planned, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't about winning anymore. It was about survival. I thought I'd seen the worst of it. The video, the smear campaigns, the empty threats, none of it had worked in Amanda's favor. I'd outmaneuvered her at every turn, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like the chaos might actually be coming to an end. But Amanda wasn't done. Not by a long shot. It started subtly. Small, seemingly insignificant things began happening. My neighbors mentioned seeing unfamiliar cars parked near my house at odd hours. My social media accounts were suddenly flooded with fake messages from strangers, accusing me of everything from fraud to infidelity. My lawyer warned me to be cautious. "She's trying to rattle you," he said. "It's a desperation move. Keep your head down." I tried to follow his advice, but then things escalated. It was a Thursday evening when the police showed up at my door. I opened it to find 2 officers standing there, one holding a clipboard, the other watching me with a cautious expression. "Nathan Miller?" the first officer asked. "Yes. We need to ask you a few questions," he said, his tone polite but firm. "What's this about?" I asked, already feeling a knot form in my stomach. The officer exchanged a glance with his partner. "We've received a report accusing you of domestic violence." The words hit me like a sledgehammer. For a moment, I couldn't speak, my brain scrambling to process what I just heard. "What?" I finally managed to say. "That's ridiculous. Who made the report?" "I'm afraid we can't disclose that at this time," the officer replied. "But we're required to follow up on any allegations of this nature." I knew immediately who was behind it. Amanda. This was her play, her final, desperate attempt to destroy me. "Can I show you something?" I said, my voice steady despite the anger bubbling beneath the surface. I pulled out my phone and opened the folder I'd been meticulously organizing for weeks. Every text, email, and voicemail Amanda had sent me since the separation was neatly cataloged. "This is the woman you're talking about," I said, handing the phone to the officer. "She's the one harassing me, not the other way around." The officer scrolled through the messages, his expression shifting from professional detachment to something resembling disbelief. "We'll include this in our report," he said finally. "Do you believe me now?" I asked. "We'll look into it," he replied. "But I'd recommend staying vigilant. These situations can escalate quickly." As they left, I felt a mix of relief and fury. Amanda was trying to drag my name through the mud, and she didn't care who got hurt in the process. The next day, I called my lawyer and told him everything. "She's weaponizing the system," he said, his tone grim. "We'll fight this, but it's going to take time. In the meantime, don't engage with her directly. Let me handle it." But Amanda wasn't finished. That evening, I received an email from her. It was short and to the point, but the malice practically dripped off the screen. "You thought you could humiliate me and get away with it? Watch your back, Nathan. This isn't over." I forwarded the email to my lawyer and ignored it, refusing to give her the satisfaction of a response. But I knew better than to underestimate her. Sure enough, Amanda's next move came a few days later. I was at work when my boss called me into his office. "We need to talk," he said, gesturing for me to sit. "What's going on?" I asked, already dreading the answer. "We've received a complaint about you," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "Anonymous but detailed. Allegations of misconduct, unethical behavior, that sort of thing." I stared at him, my blood running cold. "You can't be serious." "I don't believe it for a second," he said quickly. "But we have to investigate, as per company policy." I leaned back in my chair, the weight of it all pressing down on me. Amanda was systematically trying to ruin every aspect of my life. My reputation, my career, even my sanity. She won't stop, I muttered, more to myself than to my boss. Who won't stop? He asked. I hesitated, then decided to tell him the truth. My soon-to-be ex-wife. She's trying to destroy me because I exposed her affair. My boss frowned, clearly processing what I just said. Nathan, if this is true, you need to protect yourself. Take some time off if you need to. We'll get to the bottom of this, but you have to be careful. When I got home that night, I realized something. Amanda was counting on me to crumble under the pressure. She wanted me to feel isolated, overwhelmed, defeated. But she'd underestimated me. I wasn't going to break. If Amanda wanted a war, she was going to get one. And this time, I wasn't just playing defense. I was going to end this once and for all. Amanda's game had gone too far. The false allegations, the smear campaigns, and the constant harassment. It was a relentless assault on every part of my life. But instead of breaking me, it solidified my resolve. I spent the weekend assembling every piece of evidence I had against her. Every threatening email, every fake complaint, every police report. My lawyer and I worked late into the night strategizing. If Amanda wanted a war, I was going to finish it decisively. By Monday morning, my lawyer had filed a motion to expedite the divorce proceedings. We also submitted a defamation lawsuit against Amanda for her baseless accusations and attempts to harm my career. But the real bombshell came when we presented the evidence of her harassment and false claims to the police. Amanda had crossed a legal line, and now the system she'd tried to weaponize against me was turning on her. The courtroom was quiet, the air thick with tension. Amanda sat across from me, her once confident demeanor reduced to a nervous, jittery mess. Her lawyer, a slick-looking man who had clearly underestimated the situation, shuffled through papers, trying to salvage a case that was crumbling under the weight of evidence. My lawyer, calm and methodical, laid everything out with precision. The threatening emails, the false police report, the anonymous complaints to my employer, and, of course, the damning video that had started it all. This isn't just a case of infidelity, my lawyer said, his voice echoing through the courtroom. This is a calculated campaign of harassment and defamation, designed to destroy my client's reputation and livelihood. And the evidence speaks for itself. Amanda's lawyer tried to argue that she was emotionally distressed and acting out of character, but the judge wasn't buying it. When it was Amanda's turn to speak, she stumbled over her words, her voice shaking. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she said, tears streaming down her face. I was angry. I felt betrayed. Betrayed. I couldn't help but interject, my voice filled with incredulity. You're the one who had the affair, Amanda. You're the one who turned our lives into a spectacle. The judge banged his gavel, silencing the room. But the damage was already done. Amanda's attempts to paint herself as the victim had only made her look more pathetic. By the end of the hearing, the judge ruled in my favor. The divorce was finalized with a settlement heavily skewed in my direction. Amanda's alimony request was denied, and the house, my house, remained mine. But the most satisfying part? The judge referred Amanda's false allegations to the district attorney for further investigation, opening the door to potential criminal charges. As I left the courthouse, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The war was over and I had won. A week later, I heard through the grapevine that Trevor had left Amanda. He'd been dealing with his own fallout from the scandal and had no interest in sticking around for the wreckage of her life. She was completely alone now, with no job, no reputation, and no one to lean on. I didn't feel sorry for her. Amanda had made her choices, and now she was facing the consequences. That evening, I stood in my living room, staring at the empty space where Amanda's things had once cluttered the shelves. The house was quiet, but it wasn't the oppressive silence I'd felt during those last few months of our marriage. This was different. It was peaceful. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could see a future. One without lies, without manipulation, without betrayal. As I poured myself a glass of whiskey and sat down on the couch, I thought about everything I'd been through. It had been hell, but it had also been a lesson. A brutal, necessary reminder to never let anyone strip me of my self-worth again. Amanda had tried to destroy me, but all she'd done was make me stronger. And as I raised my glass to the empty room, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Freedom. To anyone reading this, Take it from me. Trust is sacred. If someone breaks it, don't let them convince you it's your fault. Stand your ground, fight for yourself, and never settle for less than you deserve. Here's to new beginnings.